some time to grow into the role?
I sort of heard on the grapevine that they were doing okay, but I wasn't following them day to day at all, you know. And then one day Peter Grant rang me up in New York and he said, oh, the boys are playing Carnegie Hall. Would you like to come down, you know? And I said, oh, well, yes. You know, and not the last time I played with Jimmy, the biggest audience we'd ever had was like 5,000 or so in a university in America. So I went along, you know, and I met them. Carnegie Hall, it's a concrete jungle, you know, the dressing rooms are underneath like a concrete car park. And they were very, very nice to me, especially Robert Plant was very charming, all the guys, you know. Obviously had a bit of respect, which was nice. And then they went off and did this show in front of 30,000 people, you know. Completely blew my mind. I mean, the sound was just like, they started off in those days with a whole lot of love. And they were rocking this fucking building, man. It was concrete, you know. The whole damn thing was shaking. It was extraordinary to me. I mean, Jesus Christ. There were 4 guys. It sounded like a war. And there was this sex god fitting perfectly like some sort of 6-foot snake. This guy was above them. He got the vocals above that, well above it. And I was bowled over and I thought, wow, you know, you do compliment Jimmy now, you know. You've made that incredible transition. This is your gig, you know, definitely.
Sometimes it gets so blue. Just one thing I can never do. I can't quit you, babe.
By the early 70s, Zeppelin had become the world's biggest band. Though the continual invention and multi-headed character of their sonic palette defied strict categorization, their treatment of blues, a theme that ran throughout their work, represented a definitive endpoint to the blues revolutions of the 1960s.
I think Zeppelin took blues to a new level. You know, beyond Cream, beyond Hendrix, beyond the Jeff Beck group. They're right there as blues kind of, you know, transforms into hard rock. So in a sense, they're this sort of culmination of the 60s British blues boom, and then they are the, you know, the avant-garde, the progenitors of what became metal.
To me, Led Zeppelin are, yeah, I think I probably would say the greatest blues band of their generation. And, you know, I mean, I do regard them as a blues band. Take, for example, When the Levee Breaks on the 4th album, which has the delightful songwriting credit on it, Page and Plant and Memphis Minnie, who wrote the song in the 1930s. And somehow they have managed to remain true to the spirit of Memphis Minnie and yet absolutely transform it and you know, create this entirely contemporary sound that is totally state-of-the-art 1970. I think the way that they handled blues material and transformed it was far more profound than anything Eric Clapton did with Cream, for example.
it's always interesting to conjecture as to what would Zeppelin have been, what would the new Yardbirds / Zeppelin have been if Terry Reid had been the singer, or Steve Marriott or something. I mean, would it have been different but as good? Or would it have been different and not as good? And probably not as good, actually. Because I think that Robert was more deeply steeped in the heritage of the blues. He knew more about the blues than any of the others did, actually. So he brings that blues animus, that blues spirit and sensibility. He really drags that into Zeppelin. And I'm not sure that they would have been as bluesy without that.
Without Plant, Led Zeppelin would have been a much more one-dimensional band. Once he's got into his stride, I think his contribution as a musician, rather than just the good-looking frontman who wiggles his hips and sings, his contribution as a musician is absolutely enormous. It's pushing the boundaries of what Led Zeppelin are doing, and in a way which Jimmy Page was, to his credit, very receptive to.
This natural sense of adventure drew Plant's interest towards musical forms that were markedly different from the realm of Western rock and the transatlantic fascinations of his early youth. During his time traversing the planet with Led Zeppelin, he began to discover the traditional sounds and styles of the East. Accompanied by Page, Plant concluded 2 tours in the early 70s with exploratory trips to Bombay, where the duo collaborated with the renowned Indian musician Vijay Raghav Rao.
I think just by his very nature of the kind of open-minded character he is, once Led Zeppelin started touring the world, it was about conquering the world with this brand of Anglo-American rock. But once he got to all these places, he was fascinated to find out what they had to offer. In 1972, Page and Plant do record with the Bombay Symphony Orchestra. And they rework a couple of old Led Zeppelin numbers, and so they are starting to explore this fusion of Eastern and Western sounds. It doesn't work quite, but there clearly is the seed of a very good idea there. Where it does first reach fruition, I guess, is on Kashmir, which I think Plant wrote in Morocco, on the road to Tantan, he says, in southern Morocco.
Unlike many of the musicians, particularly in England in the late 60s, who were sort of flirting with Eastern mysticism and getting into sitars and hanging out with Ravi Shankar, Plant actually had first heard, Indian and Pakistani music way before any of that. Not least because, he began a relationship with and married an Anglo-Indian girl and lived with her in West Bromwich. He's exposed to this music, the Indian community in West Bromwich. He's hearing this stuff, he's mimicking it in some of his vocal phrasing and styling.
He starts there using an Arabic scale and elements of that music to create a quite different dynamic, and builds the song into something that is quite new and different from anything Led Zeppelin have done before.
Morocco, where Plant had composed the lyrics to Kashmir, became one of the key destinations on his musical journey. And having encountered the varied tribal rhythms and styles found amongst the Berber and the Ganawa peoples, Plant was introduced to a culture that embraced both African and Arabic traditions.
He goes to Morocco, a destination for rock musicians for some time. I mean, Brian Jones, of course, had